Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the Booze.
That's unfair. I really feel like I should have done that this week.
Go for it.
It's too late now.
No, do it.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the Booze.
That's right.
We are back. This is going to be the wrap-up of the true crime portion of Gerard John Schaefer, the killer cop in Port St. Lucie, and I have left this privilege to Megan because she's going to have to say some pretty terrible things.
Yeah.
I was really stressed in the last couple of days on like how I wanted to edit this. So you're probably seeing this maybe a day or two late. I'm doing my best. This isn't something that we would normally cover.
Right.
I mean, it is now, so I'm getting used to it. But we are going to talk about some things in this episode that they're not family friendly. They are definitely not kid friendly.
Absolutely.
We are going to speak about the crimes that he committed. So it is going to get kind of rough. It is going to get kind of rough.
Yeah. I'm not looking forward to it.
It's pretty gross. There are some parts that are legitimately just gross. They are just gross. They're not even like gross towards women, or they're just gross. Mm-hmm. He's pretty nasty. So let's, I don't know what else to say. This one was weird to write because I'm so used to writing paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
And then we got into this one and it was just like,
Well, my handsome hubby
different.
was trying to say he's worried about editing this thing.
Very.
So just bear with us.
Very.
We're getting our bearings on the true crime. We definitely are excited to start doing this.
I'm sure it'll come out fine, but it's just different.
Yeah.
It's going to be uncomfortable.
So, no kids, earmuffs. Be careful.
Don't even listen to it around your pets. I don't think they'll appreciate that.
No.
Well, we found out last week he was terrible with pets.
Yeah. And he definitely left a woman's dog in her apartment to starve.
And he definitely made love to dead cows.
So gross.
I mean, that's something that really did happen.
What? Weird.
But what do you say we go ahead and get into this one?
Okay.
Let her rip, Megan. This is weird to feel like. That's why I don't even have my glasses or anything.
I know.
Because I don't have to read.
Gerard Schaefer was found guilty of killing Georgia Jessup, 17, and Susan Place, 16, both of Broward County, whose mutilated and decapitated remains were discovered in April 1973 in shallow graves near Blind Creek Beach on Hutchinson Island near Fort Pierce. Authorities believe Jessup and Place were murdered between September 27th and December 7th of 1972. Their remains were found while Schaefer was serving a 6-month sentence at the Martin County Jail for assaulting 2 girls, one 17 and the other 18.
He clearly has a type.
Yes.
And his type is normally teenage girls.
Mm-hmm.
There are cases where it was discovered that they believe he was responsible for the 2 little girls. But that was for something completely different,
Right.
where he claimed to had tried cannibalism. So bear that in mind. All of his victims are they're teenage girls.
Yeah.
Which I think is even more atrocious. Like, it's bad enough to do this kind of thing, but you target children. Children are your target. And that, to me, is...
Literally the worst?
It is the worst.
Literally the worst. In the assault case, Schaefer pleaded guilty to picking up the women while they were hitchhiking, bringing them to a wooded area in Hutchinson Island, tying nooses around their necks and threatening them with bizarre sexual acts. It was on July 21st, 1972, that Schaefer picked up 2 hitchhikers, 17-year-old Pamela Wells and 18-year-old Nancy Trotter, on the highway near a local beach. He would lie to them, telling them that hitchhiking was illegal in Martin County, then drove them back to a halfway house where they were staying. Schaefer offered to meet them the next morning while off duty and drive them to the beach himself. The girls agreed, but instead of taking them to the beach on July 22nd, Schaefer drove them to swampy Hutchinson Island off State Road A1A. There, he started making sexual remarks, then drew his gun and told the girls he planned to sell them as, quote, white slaves to a foreign prostitution syndicate. Forcing them out of the car, he bound both girls and left them balanced on tree roots with nooses around their necks, putting them at risk of hanging if they slipped and fell.
What? Why so descriptive of your white slaves?
I don't know.
It's such a weird thing to say.
It is such a weird thing.
I really feel
what?
like at gunpoint with nooses around their neck tied to a tree, that's probably the least of their worries.
Agreed.
I mean,
absolutely agreed.
With this sick. Yeah, good. He's so gross.
Yeah. Schaefer then left them there, promising to return shortly. But the girls escaped while he was gone and reached the highway where they flagged down a passing police car. They had no problem identifying their assailant, since Schaefer had told them his name.
Idiot.
By that time, Schaefer had discovered their escape and telephoned Sheriff Richard Crowder. Quote, "I've done something foolish," Schaefer told his boss. "You're going to be mad at me," end quote. He had overdone his job, Schaefer said, trying to scare the girls out of hitchhiking in the future for their own good. Fired on the spot, charged with false imprisonment, 2 counts of aggravated assault, Schaefer was released on a $15,000 bond. It was during this time that on September 27th, 1972, while Schaefer was free on bond, pending trial, 17-year-old Susan Place and 16-year-old Georgia Jessup had vanished from Fort Lauderdale. Susan's parents said the girls were last seen at her house, leaving with an older man named Jerry Shepard on their way to play guitar at a nearby beach. They never came back, but Lucille Place had noticed Schaefer's license plate number, along with a description of his blue-green Datsun. It was March 25th, 1973, before sluggish investigators traced the plate number back to Schaefer, by which time he was already in jail for assaulting the teenage girls.
I want to point something out here. If they would have originally kept him in jail for the first thing that he did, none of these other girls would have come up missing.
Abso-freaking-lutely.
Because they let him out on, and I mean, honestly, for abducting 2 teenage girls, $15,000 bond, that's not very much.
That is so minuscule for the crime.
But they let him out.
Right.
And because of that, we have a bunch
so many more that
of missing
didn't
teenage girls
need to happen.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, none of them did.
If they would have just kept him in, I'm not saying they had to throw the book at him, but just kept him in until like a trial date or whatever. I understand it's, it's fair, but in hindsight, it really sucks knowing that had they just kept him a little longer, that none of this other stuff would have happened.
Absolutely.
Because I think not all, but the majority of his crimes happened during this time.
It's so terrifying. So terrifying.
I mean, this is a, what do they call it? There's serial killers have this thing where they have like a cool down
period.
But then they have, I forget what they call it when they go out killing, but like he went out on like a murderous rage.
So gross.
Yeah, it's bad.
Now, Schaefer denied any contact with Place and Jessup, but the case began unraveling on April 1st, 1973, when skeletal remains were found on Hutchinson Island by 3 men collecting aluminum cans. 4 days later, the victims were identified from dental records. Susan Place had been shot in the jaw, detectives remarking that evidence from the crime scene indicated the 2 girls were, quote, tied to a tree and butchered, end quote. On April 7th, police searched the home of Schaefer's mother, where Gerard had personal items stored in a spare bedroom.
All right, real quick. This is, we had mentioned this, I think, in the last episode, possibly. I know we mentioned this before, how the police went to his parents' house.
Yeah.
We are going to get almost like a full list of what was found.
Oh, God.
And some of it's really bizarre. Some of it's really weird.
I mean, I get the trophy. I don't get it.
This isn't, I'm not talking about trophies.
Okay. Just random crap?
He's a creator.
Oh.
He likes to make stuff.
I don't like that.
Well, he's more of like an artist, we'll say.
Okay.
And a writer. He's also a writer.
Yeah, well, we learned that.
Yeah, we're going to find out what he writes about. I'm going to be honest, though. I couldn't actually find, even though the book exists, without buying the book, I couldn't actually find any of the writings. I can't find any of the pictures. I don't understand why, but like I did search. I searched pretty hard, but I couldn't find any of it.
Evidence recovered in the search included a stash of women's jewelry, newspaper clippings about 2 women that had been missing since 1969, and pieces of IDs belonging to vanished hitchhikers, Colette Goodenough and Barbara Wilcox, both 19.
That's good enough.
We already talked about these women.
Can't help it.
The 2 girls had last been seen alive on January 8th, a week before Schaefer was sent to jail in Martin County. And while their skeletal remains were found in early 1977, no cause of death could be determined. Thus, no charges were ever filed. As for the newspaper clippings, one referred to the February 1969 disappearance of waitress Carmen Halleck, seemingly abducted from her home. Items of her jewelry were found in Schaefer's stash, along with a gold-filled tooth identified by Halleck's dentist. But once again, no charges were filed.
Another thing I want to touch on real quick is this Carmen Halleck. I actually feel really bad for her family. They still have websites up looking for information about her.
Oh my God.
I believe it's called like findcarmenhalleck.com or something like that. But her family is still, I mean, this is 55 years ago, something like that. They are still looking
all those poor
for
people.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah.
I felt pretty bad when I saw it, if I'm being honest.
Oh my God. The second missing woman, Lee Bonadies, had been a neighbor of Schaefer's when she disappeared in September 1969. He had complained of her taunting him by undressing with her curtains open, and a piece of her jewelry was also found among his belongings. But of course, no charges were filed when her skeletal remains were finally recovered in 1978.
Now, more jewelry linked Schaefer to the disappearance of 14-year-old Mary Briscolina, who vanished from Broward County with 13-year-old Elsie Farmer in October 1972. Their skeletons were found in early 1973, but again, no cause of death could be determined, and no charges were ever filed.
How many times have we heard that already?
It's so bad.
Too many. Way too many. 1 is too many.
And 1,000 is never enough.
Oh my God. That's not where I was going, but okay.
If you know, you know. Inside that locked bedroom at the Fort Lauderdale residence of Schaefer's mother's home, police found 300 pages of lurid stories. Occasionally accompanied by crude illustrations Schaefer had both handwritten and typed over the course of several years. He's a creator.
Oh, God.
These stories detailed the kidnapping, humiliation, essay, and execution by hanging of a number of teenage girls and young women whom he routinely referred to as, quote, whores, sluts, and harlots, including 2 named Belinda and Carmen, and an unidentified woman whom he graphically described hanging at an unknown location close to Powerline Road. And he kind of pushed these off as fiction.
No.
But they're very clearly about... They're not just about women. They're about specific women.
Who he had a hand in hurting.
He didn't have a hand in them. He did it.
And torturing.
He just did it.
And...
He did it.
Ugh.
Now, several of these narratives indicate Schaefer had forced his victims to drink beverages, typically beer or wine. Because when I first read that, I was like, what, like motor oil or something? As they stood upon makeshift platforms with a noose around their necks so that he could observe them urinating prior to their hanging. This is a big thing for him. This is something that he's super into.
Stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, he had frequently returned to his crime scenes weeks or months after the actual murders in order to commit acts of necrophilia with buried and dismembered bodies, or to extract teeth from the skull. His writings also revealed his fascination with historical methods of torture and execution, and the pleasure he derived from observing acutely distressed females urinate and or defecate prior to or at the end of their hanging. That's really hard to read.
Oh my God.
It's really gross.
Who even thinks of these things?
It's
Like,
okay. Well, look, I'm just gonna be real. Okay, if you're an adult, which I hope you are listening to this, you've been on the internet. You've been to, or at least know of, adult websites. We'll say that. There are honestly categories for people that are into this stuff. So I mean, it's not something that I'm into or anything, but he's not the only person who's maybe not right before they're about to be hanged or anything, but there is a category for these people.
fine.
And no kink shame.
Like,
If you're into,
kinks,
that's fine.
I get it. But like when you're doing it in the middle of trying to torture and murder these people.
But
like,
that's his thing.
That is.
It's the reason the world has snuff films, because there are people out there that are into this kind of stuff.
I don't get it.
It's really gross.
It is so gross.
It's hard to read because to us it seems so out there, right?
Yeah.
So, but I have to say again, I have to qualify this with, he's not the only one that's into this kind of, but he is the only one out there.
Actively doing it?
I can't even say he's the only one
No,
out there
that's
actively
true,
doing
too.
it, because he inspired other people to do it. It's just really, it's really disgusting. It's really hard.
Yeah.
This is why I had to put in our last video, like, I had to explain, like, I'm always smiling and laughing and stuff, because a lot of this stuff makes me very uncomfortable.
It is so uncomfortable to
It
talk
makes
about.
me really uncomfortable, and that's just how I deal with that, is like, I tend to try to laugh it off.
Just kind of got to power through it.
But
I
it
don't
is
know.
hard. It is hard to get through some of this stuff, and I am going to pass it back over to you to get through the worst of it so you can do it.
Yay.
Now, also found were 11 guns, bags filled with live and spent cartridges, 13 hunting knives, sections of rope, and scores of softcore adult content magazines, which he had modified to depict nude, urinating women bound with ropes, hanging from trees or other makeshift gallows, or bearing bullet wounds. Now, other images recovered were 37 black and white Polaroid photographs depicting women being hanged and or mutilated. Several other images depicted Schaefer dressed in a female garment, simulating his own hanging from a tree with fecal matter smeared across his own buttocks. So now we're finding out that he's in but look, I want to make a point though, because last week you made a point to say this. When he was a kid, he wanted to be a girl.
Yeah. Because of the way his father
This
treated his sister.
clearly has affected him over time, because now he's dressing as a woman and doing things he's obviously doing things to himself too. So yeah.
Okay.
It's weird.
God.
It's so weird. Gerard Schaefer, you're a weird dude.
Yeah.
Now, a letter dated July 20th, 1971, from an individual in Brunswick, East Victoria, Australia, whom Schaefer had become acquainted with in Morocco in the summer of 1970, remember, because he used to travel,
Yeah.
contained scores of Polaroid images this individual had taken of a, quote, village in the Sahara the two had encountered, following what his companion termed a, quote, wog massacre. Now, I'm very aware that that word is like a racial slur, I think, over in England. But this is all factual information of both Europeans and Arabians. Now, several of these images depicted women who had been extensively disemboweled and otherwise mutilated with knives and axes. These are real pictures. So it makes me wonder, did he, they said that they believed he had more victims on other continents, and I wonder if these are victims of theirs and not just
That he has pictures of.
well,
like,
because I think the way they tried to play it off was that, like, this guy stumbled across a massacre and photographed it. But I wonder.
I don't believe that.
I don't
at all.
either. I don't. But we're never going to know for sure. And I don't think anything ever happened to this friend either, which he was clearly there and he was clearly into it.
Oh my God.
So I'm not sure. And this stuff is like, you can't, this isn't like readily available stuff on the internet either. So it's strange. It's very strange.
Oh, God. It's so weird. The April 6th search of Schaefer's Martin County residence yielded less physical evidence, although investigators did recover 2 human teeth kept in a plastic capsule inside the master bedroom, several knives and firearms inside a utility shed, and an extensively blood-stained white pillowcase, which had evidently been washed. Jessup's distinctive suede purse was discovered to have been in the possession of Schaefer's wife. She later informed police her husband had given her the item as a gift in about November of the previous year. Schaefer had attempted to persuade both her and his brother-in-law, Henry Dean, to discard the item upon learning of the April 1st discoveries in Oak Hammock Park, with the explanation the police may have used the item to make up some kind of evidence against him. Despite Schaefer's efforts, his brother-in-law had given them to the police.
So he tried to convince his wife and her brother to lie about it, and the brother-in-law was not having that.
He's like, no, bro.
And weird, because I remember when I first saw this, they talk about this blood-stained pillowcase, but there's really no other information about it. But this is also the days before DNA testing.
Yeah, DNA and like super in-depth testing.
Wonder
for
if they
evidence.
ever tested it, like, because I'm sure they still have it somewhere.
Yeah.
And who does it belong to?
It'd be very interesting to know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to try to see if I can find that. Actually,
Do like a little update later.
well,
maybe?
because they test things like that years and years later.
Oh,
That's why they save them.
Yep.
So I'm curious if it was ever discovered whose
Yeah.
blood it was.
Hey guys, Editing Steve here, and I just wanted to give the update that Megan just alluded to, but there is no update. I can find nothing on the majority of this stuff. I don't know if it was just because of the time frame, or I don't know. A lot of this stuff is super hard to find. If you know anything about it, or you can find anything, email me. I would love to know. But anyways, back to you, Megan.
The list of suspected victims would continue to grow over time, but Schaefer faced charges in only 2 murders. He was indicted on May 18th, 1973, for the slayings of Jessup and Place. Held without bond pending trial, he was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder in October 1973, drawing concurrent terms of life imprisonment. Before his death, Gerard Schaefer was suspected of killing dozens of young women across South Florida and elsewhere. Family members of many of his victims felt their last chance to find out what happened to their loved ones died with him.
But one cop's passion to solve the case did not vanish when Schaefer, 49, died in 1995 in Florida State Prison, where he was serving 2 life sentences for murder. Now, Fort Lauderdale homicide detective John Curcio has been gathering information and sending it to the FBI's 5-year-old missing persons DNA database as a means to identify remains found around South Florida. Now, just to let you know, this is from an article I saw from 2005.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is quite a few years ago. I don't know if this detective is still around doing this.
Okay, gotcha.
But just so you know, this is written in 05. Now, Detective Curcio started working with the family of Deborah Sue Lowe, another of Schaefer's suspected victims. The 13-year-old was last seen at about 8:30 a.m. on a drizzly Tuesday as she walked to Rickards Middle School in Fort Lauderdale on February 29th, 1972, wearing black slacks with roses, a yellow blouse, and a tan poncho. It's very 70s.
Yeah.
Now, 3 of Debbie's siblings, Eva, James, and Cheryl, submitted DNA samples to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Missing Persons DNA database in the hopes that Debbie's remains would be matched. The Lowe family's DNA was also entered into the FBI's national database. Now, Curcio believed Schaefer, a former Wilton Manors police officer and Martin County Sheriff's deputy, abducted, tortured, murdered, and assaulted dozens of women across South Florida and other states in the late 60s and early 70s. Like Debbie, many of the missing have never been located. Quote, "We believe Schaefer is responsible for the murders of a lot of women," said Curcio, the veteran homicide detective. Quote, "We just have to find the families of his victims and get their DNA entered and compare it to all the unidentified remains sitting in medical examiners' offices."
He was on a mission, trying to close the cases of two young Fort Lauderdale women, Carmen Halleck, 22, and Belinda Hutchins, 22, who disappeared between 1968 and 1972. Curcio believes Schaefer is responsible for the murder of a third Fort Lauderdale woman, Lee Bonadines Hainline, 25, who vanished in 1968. All had ties to Schaefer. When police executed the search warrant in 1973, they found jewelry, teeth, and other possessions belonging to each of the women. Police also found short stories in the home that Schaefer wrote about abduction, assault, and strangulation of young women, including a woman named Carmen.
He names these stories after the women. That's what is crazy and how they didn't use this against him. He has short stories that go into great detail about what he did with these girls' names on them, but they did nothing with them.
Literally nothing.
It is very upsetting.
It's so upsetting.
It's
Are
almost,
you kidding me?
This is almost as good as a handwritten confession.
Agreed.
It's ridiculous.
Even the loudest that you yell, "Oh, it's fiction. No, it is not.
Clearly. It is,
No, it is
by
not.
name. It's crazy.
Okay. The Carmen in his story wore a black chiffon dress. The stories were typed double-spaced on white paper. Schaefer also admitted to writing the stories, but said they were fiction. However, in a strange twist, Halleck's sister told police her sister bought a new black dress for a date with a married teacher. We may never know how many slain women litter the path of this vicious killer. As recently as June 2022, new evidence surfaced which might link Schaefer to a 48-year-old cold case. In June 1974, the skeletal remains of Singer Island Jane Doe were discovered near the waters of Palm Beach County, Florida. The local sheriff's office failed to make a connection between the missing girl and the local killer cop. The erosion of evidence and lack of ID stopped the investigation before it began. Now, thanks to DNA analysis technology, those remains were identified as Susan Gale Poole.
Well, Poole's purse was left on a friend's couch before she went missing in December 1972. Schaefer was out on bail at this time for his abduction of Pamela Wells and Nancy Trotter. Per the Washington Post, current detective William Springer says, quote, "Schaefer is the best suspect." Springer noted that Schaefer's MO was to pick up young girls hitchhiking, and the body's location, quote, "tied up in the mangroves fits his known crimes." If Poole had her purse the day she went missing, perhaps it would have found its way into Schaefer's collection. But what did Schaefer do to his victims once he had them in his grips?
Schaefer would lure his victims by either claiming he was from out of town and looking for help or wanting to hang out, offering rides to girls hitchhiking. Sometimes he would pick up his victims while on duty, telling them whatever they were doing was illegal. Either way, he would get them into his vehicle and offer to drive them to their destination. Once in his car, Schaefer would drive them to an out-of-the-way swampy area and force them out of the car at gunpoint. That's when things got terrifying. If we go off of what we know, he would have the girls stand on mangrove roots before tying pre-made nooses around their necks, assuring them that at any moment they would result in slipping, falling, and of course, hanging, garnering himself the nickname, the Hangman. But it goes farther than that. From this point, with the girls tied up and held at gunpoint, the games would begin. He would scare them by telling them they were being sold into foreign sex trade. He would also have the girls choose which would be the first to die, getting off on the fear in their voices. He then went into the mutilation. He would make one girl watch as he gouged out eyes and cut deep gashes into their friends, while telling the other they were next. The next part is a bit foggy. Some believe it is at this point he would assault them, but it is believed by many that after his victims took their last breath, that's when he would begin to act on his necrophiliac urges, just like he did with the mutilated, decapitated cattle from his youth.
This is where the story of Gerard John Schaefer's nightmarish reign ends, but it's not the end of the story completely. Now let's talk about a man named Vincent Rivera. Now, on February 10th, 1990, Vincent Faustino Rivera met 43-year-old Grace Anthony at a bar. He talked his way into her home and eventually he murdered her. She was found strangled to death on her bedroom floor by her children a few days later. Now, although the police initially said that she had been beaten to death, they later said it looked like she died of natural causes.
I'm sorry, what?
I don't get that.
What?
I feel like that's not one that you would confuse with dying of natural causes.
No.
Like if you beat somebody to death, they don't look like they just had a stroke.
Beaten and strangled.
Very, very strange. It's a very
There's
strange.
some telltale things there to say that is definitely not natural causes.
That's weird. Now, Kevin Lamar Davis was an African-American hairstylist in Tampa, Florida. He was driving down the street with some friends when he made a terrible mistake. He unknowingly offered a ride to his soon-to-be killer as he walked down the street. Now, a week later, Rivera and some of his friends visited Davis. Now, the friends left, and Rivera stabbed Davis to death in his home at 8315 Iberia Place. Now, Rivera fled to Miami, ditched the car, and flew to Los Angeles. Police caught up with Rivera less than a week later in California. He was using Davis's stolen credit cards and pawned some of Davis's jewelry. Now, he was offering to pay guests hotel expenses if they gave him cash in return, which doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand that. Oh, I do get it.
He's paying with the dude's credit card
okay, all right,
and
right,
getting
right.
cash from people.
Yes, I get it.
Okay.
Now, once under arrest, Rivera confessed to murdering Davis and Anthony. He was found to have had IDs from multiple people, and police in California sent Rivera back to Florida where he faced murder charges. Even though his crime seemed well planned, 2 psychiatrists said Rivera was incompetent, and the claim was that he hallucinated and was incoherent. His lawyer said, quote, he was an awful sick puppy. Now, one psychiatrist, Dr. Melvin Gardner, said Rivera had the highest potential for homicide he had ever seen. He recommended Rivera be, quote, under heavy sedation and be maintained in this way at the state hospital. Now, Gardner had previously interviewed other murderers, including serial killer Bobby Joe Long, who terrorized Tampa in the 1980s. The prosecutor said it could take months for Rivera to stabilize. Quote, hopefully, we'll get him back in 3 months so I can put him in the electric chair where he belongs, Ronald N. Ficarota said.
Lock him up.
That's a name.
Lock him up.
Ficarota.
It's a mouthful.
We come across some very
strange names.
Well, not strange, just unique, like ones I've never heard before. I mean, it's a very Italian name. Now, Rivera had told the police he fled to New York for Florida because Florida had the death penalty and he wanted to die. But before trial, Rivera changed his mind and, in a deal, pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. In state prison, after the trial, Rivera was said to be problematic.
Yeah, I bet.
He filed appeals about the trial, sentencing, and human rights complaints. He filed so many appeals that the United States Supreme Court got so frustrated they forbade non-criminal writs because they were too frivolous. And Rivera then filed a complaint in response.
He was just a complaining fool.
That's right.
Wow. And they were like, you know. He went on to have 47 disciplinary write-ups in 5 years, including assaults on other prisoners. On December 3rd, 1995, Rivera would take it upon himself to kill serial killer Gerard Schaefer. It is unclear why it happened, but it is said to have been over hot water, or Rivera might have been a hired assassin. He was sentenced to an additional 53 years and 10 months. Rivera was given more time for serial killer Gerard Schaefer's murder than for the innocent victims he killed. Today, Rivera has the distinction of killing another serial killer. Rivera, however, is pretty well unknown. He is only mentioned on Schaefer's wiki page, and that's it. And that's the story of Gerard John Schaefer.
Or is it?
Ooh.
Because we have one more episode,
Okay.
and it's going to be about the stain that he left on a specific area in Florida. Because what we didn't really talk about, I mean, we've talked about it in other parts of this, but there is a place that is said to be haunted because of him. And it's called the Devil Tree down in Florida. And this is actually where he would tie the nooses to the girls and tie them around trees and
Specifically,
do
the
those
mangrove roots.
Yeah, do those terrible things to these girls. Was in this little spot, and the tree has a name.
So here comes the paranormal tie-in.
Yeah, which is how we ended up on this story in the first place. I'm hoping I don't have to read any more like gross stuff.
I don't want to.
I mean,
a lot.
We haven't done a paranormal episode in a while, so I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, me too.
And I have some ideas for some upcoming stuff too. So it's going to be different. Like I'm tired of just talking about one thing. We're bigger than that. So we're gonna get into some other weird stuff, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my beautiful wife just bought me a drone for Valentine's Day. So if we can get because I don't know if some of you are my friends on Facebook that listen, and I like taking photos and stuff. So if we can get a local location, I'm gonna get my drone out there so I can get my own,
Get our own
footage.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty excited about that. So this is where the story of Gerard John Schaefer's life ends. But unfortunately, we think he might have left us something
Ugh.
that we're gonna have to get into next week. So. Aren't you excited?
I am.
No. Well, where can they find us?
Well, they can find us on Instagram at @forthebooze_podcast and on Facebook at @forthebooze.
That's right. You can find us everywhere else at For the Booze. I'm not doing this anymore because I got it super wrong last week. I know we're on TikTok. I haven't posted anything on there though. We're on TikTok. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube. We are like everywhere. Just if you Google For the Booze podcast, we do come up on everything.
Yes.
Which is nice.
That we do.
I feel very accomplished. And don't forget, if you have a listener story or, a show suggestion
Yeah.
or, even just maybe you have an idea for something we could change. It doesn't matter. If you just want to reach out to us, check us out at forthebooze12@gmail.com, not forthebooze.com.
I know.
Or, yeah.
.com.
Gmail, For the Booze. It's forthebooze12@gmail.com. You would think after 3 years
I know.
this would be easier.
That break messed us up.
It did.
But it was much needed.
I still needed it.
It was needed.
And obviously, big shout out to our Patreons.
Love our Patreon.
Beautiful people. I have a question for one of our Patreons. Okay, I know that all of them, except for maybe 2,
Okay.
live in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And now Tina, who got us these lights a while back, I'm very curious because I know you live in a European country. I won't say where. Do you listen in English or is it translated?
Oh, that's a good question.
But see, now I think she probably does listen in English because Europeans are usually, I'm sorry, but they're usually smarter than Americans.
Definitely
So they speak
bilingual, multilingual, all the things. Yes.
which we have here, but it's just less likely.
I'm
So I'm
not.
curious. Let me know. Do you listen to us in English? Like, do you get to hear how bad we read? Or do you listen, or does it translate it? I was just something I was curious about. So thank you to our Patreons who honestly, I don't know if I would have come back to the microphone had it not been for them.
Oh, yeah, we
So,
love you guys. And
yeah.
if you guys, anybody else listening wants to join our Patreon, we do an extra episode called Behind the Booze.
That's right.
Over there on Patreon. So come check it out if
That's
you
right.
want to
We read
get some
ghost.
extra content.
We read terrible ghost stories from the internet.
We do.
And it's fun. But
It is fun.
I'm actually thinking about doing something a little different on there too.
I know.
If you'd like to join the Patreon, it's /for the booze _ podcast over on Patreon. And yeah, it's a big help. We love it. And I do have ideas for the future that I want to do extra for Patreons because I don't have to do what they do.
That's right.
But I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Did I do it right this time? Other than I still can't remember our social medias.
We do it right because it's how we want to do it.
I guess. Go ahead and take us out.
Well, thank you, everybody, so much for listening. And we will see you in the next one.
Bye. I guess don't use toilet paper.
What?
You don't want to have poop smeared on your butt.